In the summer of 2010, the music world was about to change forever. It didn't start with a hit single or a sold-out tour. It began with 5 strangers, 5 auditions, and 5 dreams that almost ended before they began. Harry Styles, Niall Horan, Zayn Malik, Louis Tomlinson, and Liam Payne didn't know it yet, but they were standing on the edge of something far bigger than themselves. Each boy walked into the X Factor with a single goal: to prove they had what it takes to make it alone. None of them imagined their real destiny would begin the moment they lost. They came from different towns, different lives, different stories. A bakery worker from Cheshire, a schoolboy from Mullingar with a guitar, a shy, soulful singer from Bradford, a football-mad lad from Doncaster, and a determined young man from Wolverhampton who had already tasted rejection once before. One by one, they stepped in front of the judges, sang their hearts out, and still fell short of making it through as solo artists. For most contestants, that's where the story ends. But fate, helped by the sharp instincts of Simon Cowell and Nicole Scherzinger, had a different plan. In a decision that took only minutes but would echo for years, the judges brought the 5 boys back side by side. "You're a group now," they were told. They didn't even have a name yet, but something had already shifted. 5 separate voices had just become one. And in that moment, One Direction was born. It was a gamble. 5 voices, different styles, one identity. But something clicked. Harry offered charisma. Louis had cheeky charm. Liam brought discipline. Niall radiated warmth. Zayn added a rich, soulful tone. Individually, they were hopefuls. Together, they were electric. Their first song as a group was an acoustic rendition of Torn. Simple, just voices and guitars, but it revealed the chemistry they shared. They appeared confident, fun, like a gang of friends, and fearless. They surged through the X Factor, captivating judges and viewers. Clips of their performances spread rapidly online. They finished 3rd, but the competition was no longer the end. It was only the beginning. In the aftermath, Simon Cowell signed them to Psycho Records. Recording began in early 2011. A book, Forever Young, captured their meteoric rise. Even before an album, their online momentum exploded. Social media became their megaphone. They were unpolished, candid, real. Fans felt part of the journey. Every tweet, every moment shared online strengthened the bond. What bound them wasn't just their harmonies, it was hope. Each carried their own ambition, and together they shared aspirations greater than themselves. That hope turned failed solo auditions into an international phenomenon in a matter of months. Their early sound was bright, warm, and inviting. Acoustic guitars, pop rock energy, voices intertwined. Authentic, fun, and unpretentious, a sound the world could embrace. From solo hopefuls to a tight-knit group in 10 minutes. From 3rd place to the brink of world domination. They had formed, they had found their voice. But what happened next would redefine how pop music and fandom would work forever. They had their name, they had their sound, and now they needed the world to hear it. The year was 2011, and the music industry was shifting. Radio still mattered, but the real battlefield was online, a place where one viral video could launch a career, and one tweet could spark a movement. For One Direction, it was the perfect storm. Their debut single, What Makes You Beautiful, was released in September. Within hours, the internet erupted. The song was more than catchy, it was an anthem. Bright guitar riffs, irresistible hooks, and lyrics that made millions feel seen. In the first week alone, it sold over 150,000 copies in the UK, debuting at #1. Fans weren't just buying the music, they were recruiting new ones. Teenagers became marketing teams, armed with hashtags, profile pictures, and endless streams of fan art. Twitter timelines filled with countdowns to release dates. YouTube comments turned into meeting places. And the boys leaned into it. They didn't hide behind publicists. They replied to fans, shared behind-the-scenes moments, laughed at their own mistakes. It was messy, unfiltered, and real. In an age of polished celebrity personas, One Direction felt like friends you could actually talk to. Their rise wasn't confined to the UK. As What Makes You Beautiful climbed charts across Europe, whispers of the British invasion began again, echoes of a cultural phenomenon not heard since the days of the Beatles. American fans discovered them online months before the band even set foot in the United States. By the time their debut album, Up All Night, dropped in November 2011, they were already global stars. The record didn't just perform well, it broke records. In early 2012, it debuted at #1 on the US Billboard 200, making One Direction the first British group in history to achieve that with a debut album. The hysteria was impossible to ignore. Airports turned into impromptu concerts. Hotels became fortresses guarded by security. Streets flooded with fans holding signs, singing lyrics, hoping for just one glimpse. Reporters called it 1D mania. The boys called it surreal. And yet, beneath the screaming crowds and sold-out arenas, the core never changed. 5 young men who still teased each other backstage, who still remembered the feeling of standing nervously in that audition room. But as the spotlight grew brighter, so did the pressure. The pace was relentless. Tours, signings, interviews, studio sessions. It was the dream they'd wanted and a reality they were still learning to survive. They had conquered the UK. They had broken America. Now, the rest of the world was waiting. Next, the era of global domination begins. The year was 2012, and One Direction were no longer just a British boy band. They were a global force. Everywhere they went, the world seemed to tilt toward them. Tokyo, Sydney, New York, Rio, London. Airports became flashpoints of chaos. Streets were blocked by screaming crowds. Hotels were surrounded day and night. This was no longer fan enthusiasm, it was a cultural event. Their debut world tour, Up All Night, sold out within minutes. Demand was so high that extra dates were added across continents. And every show was the same, thousands of voices singing every lyric, every night, as if each city had been waiting its whole life for this moment. But One Direction weren't standing still. In November 2012, just 8 months after their debut album topped charts, they released their second, Take Me Home. Where Up All Night was the sound of arrival, Take Me Home was the sound of acceleration. Bigger hooks, sharper production, a confidence that came from knowing they could fill stadiums. The album went straight to #1 in over 30 countries. Songs like Live While We're Young and Little Things showcased 2 sides of the band, the high-energy anthems made for jumping in unison and the soft, intimate ballads that felt like whispered confessions. By 2013, they were not just selling records, they were selling out entire stadium tours. The Where We Are tour became the highest-grossing tour ever by a vocal group. Over 3 million tickets sold, hundreds of millions in revenue. And yet, backstage, they were still the same 5 young men, trading jokes and inside references. Then came Midnight Memories in late 2013. It was more than a pop album, it was a turning point. The sound leaned rockier, more mature, with tracks like Story of My Life revealing a deeper, more reflective side. Critics began to see them as more than a teen sensation. They were evolving. The numbers told their own story. 4 consecutive #1 albums in the US. Over 100 awards won in just 3 years. More than 35 million records sold worldwide. But behind the glittering statistics was something even more powerful: connection. Fans didn't just watch One Direction's success, they felt part of it. Every album release was a shared victory. Every tour announcement was a collective countdown. They had risen faster than anyone expected, and higher than most thought possible. But in the shadows of success, cracks were beginning to form. Tiny fractures under the weight of fame, exhaustion, and the pressure to keep topping themselves. The next chapter would test their bond in ways they never imagined. From the outside, One Direction looked unstoppable. Record-breaking tours, chart-topping albums, awards that filled entire shelves. But behind the stage lights, the cracks were widening. The schedule was relentless. Months on the road blurred into one another. Hotel rooms, airport lounges, rehearsal halls. Every day brought a new city, a new crowd, a new interview. And somewhere in that whirlwind, the line between work and life began to disappear. Fame had lifted them higher than they'd ever dreamed, but fame also demanded more than they'd ever imagined. By 2014, tensions were quietly building, not from a lack of friendship, but from exhaustion, pressure, and the unspoken truth that 5 very different lives were being forced into the same unbreakable routine. During the Where We Are and On the Road Again tours, the boys powered through grueling schedules, often with barely a day off. They smiled for cameras, hit every note on stage, and kept the energy alive for their fans, because they knew the fans were the reason they were there at all. But offstage, the strain was real. The constant scrutiny from the media, the paparazzi, the rumors, it was inescapable. Every expression was analyzed, every word became a headline. Then, in March 2015, the world stopped. Zayn Malik, one of the original five, announced he was leaving the band. Fans were devastated. Social media exploded. Some begged him to stay, others sent messages of love and support. For the band, it was a seismic shift. Zayn had been part of the foundation, and now they had to find their balance again, without him. In the months that followed, the four remaining members, Harry, Niall, Lewis, and Liam, pushed forward. They released Made in the AM in November 2015, an album that reflected both maturity and the bittersweet reality of change. It debuted at #1 in the UK, #2 in the US, and proved they could still dominate the charts, even as a four-piece. But behind the music, they knew the road ahead was changing. In December 2015, the announcement came. One Direction would be going on hiatus. They called it a break, but fans knew it could be the end of an era. After 5 years of relentless success, they were finally stepping away. From the tours, from the cameras, from the life that had consumed them since that day in 2010 when they first stood together on the X Factor stage. They promised it wasn't goodbye, but nobody could know for sure. Next, the boys go their separate ways, and a new chapter begins. Solo journeys, new identities, and the question that still lingers today, will they ever stand on the same stage again? The stage was empty, the lights had faded. For the first time in 5 years, Harry, Niall, Liam, Lewis, and Zayn were no longer part of the same band. What followed was uncharted territory. Each would now step into the spotlight alone. No harmonies to lean on, no shared interviews, no group decisions. Just their own voice, their own vision, and the weight of living up to the legacy of One Direction. Zayn Malik was the first to move. In March 2016, a year after leaving, he released Mind of Mine. It debuted at #1 in multiple countries, with the single Pillow Talk topping charts in the US and UK. It was a bold statement, R&B infused, sultry, and far from the pop rock sound of One Direction. Zayn had shed the boy band image in one stroke, carving out a more adult, introspective space for himself. Niall Horan took a different route. His debut single, This Town, in 2016, was understated, acoustic, heartfelt, built on storytelling. It revealed a folk pop sensibility that would carry through his album Flicker, which debuted at #1 in the US. Niall's path wasn't about spectacle, it was about intimacy, connecting one-on-one through melody and sincerity. Liam Payne leaned toward the chart's cutting edge. His debut single, Strip That Down, in 2017, brought him into the world of club beats, hip-hop influences, and dance pop. Collaborations with artists like Quavo and Rita Ora kept him in the mainstream spotlight, while singles like For You showcased his versatility as a performer. Louis Tomlinson faced a unique challenge, balancing personal tragedy with his career. In 2016, he lost his mother, Johanna Deacon, to leukemia. Her encouragement fueled his determination to keep going. Louis' music, starting with Just Hold On and later his debut album Walls, carried themes of resilience, family, and loyalty. He built a reputation for authenticity, an artist who wasn't afraid to show the scars. Harry Styles took perhaps the boldest creative leap. In 2017, his self-titled debut album stunned critics. With sweeping rock ballads like Sign of the Times and a retro 1970s-inspired sound, he positioned himself as more than a former boy band star. He was an artist in his own right. Touring globally, acting in Dunkirk, and later releasing Fine Line with its chart-topping single Watermelon Sugar, Harry became one of the most acclaimed and commercially successful of the group. Different sounds, different audiences, different identities. But no matter how far they traveled from the One Direction brand, the shadow of their shared history followed them. Interviews always circled back to the same question: will you ever reunite? For now, they were focused on building their own worlds, but the pull of what they'd built together, the memories, the fans, the records, never truly faded. Next, we look at the impact they left behind, not just on music, but on an entire generation. A cultural legacy that still shapes pop today. One Direction were more than a band. They were a generation's heartbeat. From 2010 to 2015, they didn't just sell music, they created a global conversation.
They were the faces on bedroom walls, the voices in headphones on the bus to school, the reason millions of teenagers across continents set alarms for 3 a.m. just to catch a live stream. They arrived in an era when the music industry was shifting. Radio still mattered, television still mattered, but the true frontier was the internet. Before them, superstardom meant polished interviews, controlled appearances, carefully staged press photos. One Direction tore that script in half. They met fans where they lived, online, not through scheduled publicity campaigns, but through unfiltered moments. A tweet from Harry could travel the globe in seconds. A joke from Louis could become a meme that lived for years. Niall's smile in a candid photo could set timelines alight. Zayn's quiet charisma drew millions in without a word. Liam's openness made fans feel like they truly knew him. This wasn't marketing, it was friendship at scale, and it changed everything. Their fans, the Directioners, weren't an audience in the traditional sense. They were a global force. They didn't just consume content, they generated it. Fan art, fan fiction, edits, trend campaigns. They coordinated streaming parties, chart pushes, and birthday projects. They made sure that no album release, no award nomination, no music video went unnoticed.
It was a new model for fandom, organized, strategic, and fiercely loyal. So loyal that in 2012, when What Makes You Beautiful was up for awards, fans used online voting to carry it to victory in record numbers. So committed that they could turn an offhand comment from the band into a trending hashtag worldwide. Directioners built not just a fan base, but a community. Across languages, borders, and time zones, they connected over the shared love of 5 boys who had once been strangers. For some, it was the first time they felt part of something bigger than themselves. For others, it was the friendships they made within the fandom that would last a lifetime. And the band understood. They fed that connection with small human gestures, random meet and greets outside venues, handwritten notes slipped to fans, acknowledging signs in the crowd mid-song. Those moments weren't filler, they were the foundation. But their cultural reach wasn't just about fan devotion, it was about influence. One Direction redefined the boy band for a modern era. They didn't dress the same, move in perfect sync, or hide their differences. They embraced individuality, 5 personalities, 5 wardrobes, 5 styles of humor, and yet, when the music started, they were perfectly in tune. This set them apart from the polished uniformity of boy bands past. It made them relatable. You didn't have to love all 5, you could have a favorite, your bias, while still loving the group as a whole. Musically, they blended timeless pop hooks with just enough edge to grow alongside their audience. Up All Night was pure youthful exuberance. Take Me Home captured the height of their early hysteria. Midnight Memories introduced rock influences and maturity. 4 and Made in the AM leaned into storytelling and introspection, and it worked. By the time of their hiatus, they had sold over 70 million records, topped charts in over 100 countries, and broken touring records once thought untouchable. Their music became part of life's milestones: first crushes, heartbreaks, graduations, long car rides with friends. Songs like Little Things and Story of My Life weren't just chart hits, they were memory markers. You could hear them years later and remember exactly where you were, who you were with, and what you were feeling. Even after the hiatus, their legacy didn't fade, it grew. Streaming platforms introduced them to younger listeners who had been children during their rise. TikTok trends resurrected old performances and turned them viral again. Fan accounts, years later, still gained followers by posting vintage 1D clips. And their influence reached beyond themselves. They inspired the next wave of pop acts, from boy bands like Why Don't We and Pretty Much to solo artists who cited One Direction as proof that global superstardom was still possible in the streaming era. Music executives studied their trajectory, how they built an online community before releasing a debut album, how they made fans feel like part of the story, how they avoided the burnout of a single star by distributing attention across all 5 members. But perhaps their greatest impact was emotional. They made millions of young people feel seen, heard, and valued. They offered joy in hard times, companionship in loneliness, and a sense of belonging to those who needed it most. And though the band hasn't stood together on stage since 2015, the connection hasn't disappeared. In many ways, it has deepened, strengthened by nostalgia, sustained by hope. Because One Direction were never just about the music, they were about moments, and moments never truly end. Next, the story comes full circle.
reflections on what truly made them the #1 boy band in the world, and a tribute to the fans who made it possible. Success can be measured in numbers, record sales, chart positions, awards. By those standards alone, One Direction were untouchable. They sold millions of albums, broke touring records, and collected an endless list of accolades. Yet the numbers only tell part of the story. They explain the scale, but not the why. The real reason they became the biggest boy band in the world lies in something less tangible, an alchemy of talent, timing, and connection that simply can't be manufactured. From the beginning, they stood out because of their differences. 5 distinct voices, 5 distinct personalities, each bringing something essential to the group. Harry's effortless charisma gave him a magnetism that drew eyes to the stage. Niall's warmth and sincerity made him approachable, the kind of star fans felt they could talk to. Zayn's mysterious intensity added depth and intrigue. Louis' sharp wit and mischief balanced the mix with humor and spontaneity. Liam's grounded, dependable nature provided a steady anchor through the chaos. Alone, they were talented. Together, they were irreplaceable. That individuality was paired with something rarer in the pop industry: authenticity. They didn't pretend to be flawless. On stage, they laughed when something went wrong. They forgot lyrics, missed cues, and turned slip-ups into inside jokes with the crowd. Those moments weren't embarrassing, they were bonding. Fans didn't just see a performance, they saw real people behind the music. Timing was just as important. One Direction emerged in a world hungry for a new kind of pop star, one that could be both larger than life and within reach. The rise of Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram created an unprecedented opportunity for connection, and the band seized it completely. Social media wasn't just a promotional tool for them, it was a direct lifeline to millions of fans. They didn't delegate their online presence to a marketing team. They wrote their own tweets, posted their own photos, and engaged in ways that felt spontaneous and personal. Fans weren't simply watching their careers unfold, they were part of the journey, celebrating every chart milestone, every sold-out tour, every music video as if it were their own achievement. The music itself carried the same sense of range and relatability. One Direction could deliver the pure joy of youth with tracks like What Makes You Beautiful, but they could also slow things down, offering intimate ballads like Little Things and Story of My Life that spoke directly to their audience's emotions. Their discography offered a soundtrack to growing up, songs for crushes, for heartbreaks, for long car rides with friends, for nights that felt endless and mornings that came too soon. Each album reflected an evolution, not only in sound but in maturity, allowing fans to grow alongside them. Perhaps the most enduring part of their success was the unshakable bond they shared. That chemistry, first seen in the rehearsal rooms of the X Factor, never faded. On stage, they moved together as if guided by instinct, responding to each other without words, reacting to jokes, glances, and moments in a way that could never be scripted. Fans picked up on it immediately, the sense that they weren't just bandmates, but brothers. In the end, what made them #1 wasn't just their talent or their timing. It was the way they made people feel. They made fans feel seen, valued, and part of something larger than themselves. They created not just a fandom, but a family, one that has endured years beyond the band's hiatus. Even now, fans gather online to revisit old clips, celebrate anniversaries, and hold on to the hope of one more tour, one more album, one more night with the lights down and the crowd singing in unison. For One Direction, the records and awards will always matter, but their true legacy is emotional. It's the millions of personal stories tied to their music. It's the way they transformed fleeting pop stardom into a lasting, living memory. And it's the knowledge that for a generation, they weren't just a band, they were the band. The story is almost over, but before the final chapter, there's one more thing to say. This is for the fans, the ones who made it possible, and the ones who still believe the best might be yet to come. The story of One Direction is, at its heart, a story about connection. From the moment 5 nervous teenagers stood together on the X Factor stage, something began that neither they nor the world could have predicted. In just 5 years, they went from complete strangers to a global phenomenon, rewriting the blueprint for what a boy band could be.
But even more remarkable than their achievements on the charts or in the record books was the relationship they built with the people who supported them. For every stadium sold out, there was a fan who had counted down the days until the show. For every award won, there were millions who had voted tirelessly online, refreshing pages late into the night. For every song released, there was someone who found meaning in the lyrics, whether it was the joy of a first love, the ache of a goodbye, or the reminder that they were not alone. One Direction didn't just give their fans music, they gave them memories, moments, and milestones that became part of their lives. The band often said that none of it would have been possible without the fans, but the truth is more profound than that. The fans didn't just support the journey, they were the journey. They built the community, spread the music, and carried the band's name into every corner of the globe. They turned concerts into celebrations, songs into anthems, and 5 young men into household names. In return, One Direction gave them a front-row seat to one of the most extraordinary rises in modern music history. Even now, years after the hiatus, the connection hasn't faded. The music still plays, on streaming platforms, in TikTok trends, in the background of old home videos. Young fans still discover them for the first time, and those who grew up with them revisit the songs like opening a time capsule. In every replay, every lyric sung aloud, the magic returns. It's proof that some bonds are too strong to break, too deeply woven into people's lives to disappear. There is still one question that lingers. Will they ever stand together on the same stage again? No one can answer that with certainty, but perhaps that's part of the beauty of their story. It remains unfinished. In every hopeful tweet, every anniversary celebration, every rumor of a reunion, there's a reminder that the door has never truly closed. If this is the end, it is an ending worthy of their journey, not with a final curtain drop, but with the echo of voices still singing. And if it is not the end, if one day the lights rise again on 5 figures standing side by side, then it will be because the fans kept the dream alive. For now, their legacy belongs to the millions who believed in them from the start. The ones who filled arenas, trended hashtags, memorized every lyric, and stood by them through change and distance. This story is theirs as much as it is Harry's, Niall's, Zayn's, Lewis's, and Liam's. One Direction was never just 5 boys in a band. It was millions of hearts beating in time to the same songs, across borders, languages, and oceans. And while the tours may have ended, the music and the memories will play on forever. And this is just the beginning. If you've loved revisiting their journey with us, make sure you stay subscribed and keep watching, because we're planning even more deep dives, untold stories, and behind-the-scenes moments about this incredible band. One Direction's history is still being written, and you won't want to miss a single chapter.
You're one of us. Stay curious, stay brave. Like, subscribe, and never miss a twist.